Ahoy! The expansion is getting closer and there are a lot of different ways in which you can make gold for the expansion. Now, this video was meant to come out earlier, but unfortunately the PTR dropped in the middle of a week, right on the day as I was planning to release this, so things have changed a little bit, but I will talk about what I think is worth investing into now, what is worth tracking on the market. That said, there is a problem with every trading tips video I release, and that is that after I post a trading tips video, the market gets a lot more competition. What I do is I post my trading tips early on Patreon. In this case, I even posted them early before the PTR came out. So if you want to get that little bit of advantage, then consider supporting me there for future trading tips and gathering tips for the expansion and so on. Now let's get into the investment side of things. As you can see from my gold, I have made a lot of investments myself. I started at 400,000. I loaned out some money, but I spent at least 200,000 at this point on various things on the trading post. I think there is a lot of gold to be made in the expansion, and we will need it too. We begin with some items that I think will gain some value, but not as much as I originally thought. That is because crafting is slowed down compared to at the moment, so you will need less of certain resources overall. The first one are weapon craft mods. I think weapon perks, if the perk is good, will obviously be valuable, and a lot of perks are getting changed in the expansion. I'm not going to go through all of them here because it's a lot of changes. You can look into the patch notes for specific ones, but I wanted to show you one example. So for example here, the Steel Great Axe Charm gives us Refreshing Charge, which is getting a buff in the expansion. This refreshing effect will go up to 67% on the weapon, and well, let's just say if you have 67% cooldown reduction on your weapon for this ability, and you also have the extra cooldown reduction that you can get from armor, from the new special armor and from focus, this is getting pretty close to instant refresh. And yeah, if we're looking at the sell orders here, they go for 40, but the good thing is that buy orders for weapon charms are kind of annoying, which is why they are almost always cheap. So you can see that right now they're going for 50 cents, and whoever's buying here has definitely bought some already, for a perk that is likely going to have some value in the expansion. Next up, we have Expiring craft mods. Again, these are all listed in the patch notes. Just to give you an example here once again, we have Shard of Adamant, which provides you with Indestructible. You can see that these are going for 270 on the market, and if you buy them with a buy order, on my server you'd be paying 1 gold and 7 right now. Now, this is very dependent on the server, and the resources can vary, so again, it's very worth looking through the patch notes. They all have the same wording when it comes to what exactly is getting removed or at least changed into another perk. For example, the Vial of Lost Essence is one that gets turned into health, and the same with the Urn of Lost Essence. Those are going for a little bit more because of that, I'm assuming, and also because Human Ward is kind of still used at the moment, I suppose. But other ones like Writhing Briar, for example, are going for much cheaper orders here, though I would say that 2 gold is probably the maximum I would spend on something like this, if even. Keep in mind that, again, crafting is going to be lower, so attribute craft mods will be worth less, and when you salvage these, you get a random attribute craft mod. You can't choose, you just get any of the 5, so depending on which one you get, it may be worth more or less. And on the whole topic of crafting, I also need to mention golden scarabs, because those will be needed for prismatic scarabs. You will need 10 to lock in specific perks. But I don't think that the scarabs will be the biggest bottleneck, to be honest, because other resources that you need cost much more in comparison. And there will be quite a few scarabs around, since the new area also drops golden scarabs. So I think the price point at the moment here, for example, with 700 for a buy order isn't bad. It's not expensive compared to what they used to be, but I find it very hard to tell how much they will actually go up or just stay the same. Even if you roll just with a golden scarab, with the 2-perker and not with the prismatic scarab, currently, at least on PTR, you still needed another resource that costs 5,000 gold every single time, so that is going to be a much bigger factor than the golden scarab. Let's switch into a little bit safer territories here. So when it comes to ward potions, we have 2 reagents that are mainly used for that, and one of them would be Earthshell Tail. You can see that that is fairly cheap here at the moment, and those will be used for any ward potion that is now kind of replacing ward on armor, because ward potions will now last for 40 minutes, or in the expansion they will, and sometimes you will need multiple per expedition if you're switching between different ward types throughout the expedition. For example, if you need Ancient Bane and Lost Bane and Ancient Ward and Lost Ward, you're kind of swapping these potions the same way that you would swap your coatings. Alternatively, you can also get Spinefish Fins, which have exactly the same effect. It is possible that with the expansion, people will want more Bane trophy, specifically Wildlife Bane, because that is for the new area, and I think it's just one of the most effective ways that you'll get extra damage now, especially in the beginning. The resource for major Wildlife Bane trophies is relatively cheap. It's Pristine Bear Claw. You can see, for example, right now buy orders are going for 11 here, and the resource for the basic trophy of the same kind is the Pristine Wolf Claw, which goes for very, very little gold, so you can easily get enough for yourself and maybe some extra ones if you want to craft some and sell some, because I think some people will just not be bothered to craft stuff themselves and just buy some trophies. Currently, it looks like with the expansion, we may no longer be able to get trophy mats from aptitude caches. This is not guaranteed, maybe this is just an oversight, but if that happens, that would likely mean that a lot of these types of resources would increase in value because you will need them still. And with the likely returning players, there are probably a lot of them that don't have trophies yet. I wouldn't go overboard here, assuming they may add them back into the aptitude caches, but I do think that stocking up on general trophy mats, at least for your own needs, is a good idea. There may be exceptions to this, for example the Major Angry Earth Combat Trophy, which is made with glowing sap from Banes, may actually be easier to farm because Banes is apparently soloable now and has a quicker respawn rate. Now, Mount Victuals are an interesting topic. You can see that here on New World Database. If you go on the PTR tab, you can see we have the whole recipe for these. These are used to provide you with extra riding XP, which in itself is nice, but apparently there is a cooldown on using these, or it used to be on PTR at least, of 3 per day. And also, riding levels extremely quickly. So these may not be that necessary for most players. If you're grinding through riding quickly, then you're probably not going to use them or care much about them, because they're probably going to be done before you use most of them. I don't know if there's going to be any aptitude benefits to riding or something down the line where it could be beneficial, but for now I'm not sure if these will actually be useful. I can show you the current riding aptitude right here, and you can see why I'm not so sure about the value, because what you can see here is just a bunch of random craft mods that you can mostly farm fairly easily, except for Brilliant Animals really, and some resources here that are all just directly related to what you need to get this in the first place. So you can get more vitamins to make more vittles, to make more vitamins to get more aptitude, but I'm not really sure if you're getting much out of that you actually want. Anyways, if you want to stock up for it, you can see the required resources for the luxury version here. You also have the Hardy Mount Vittles here, and you have the other ones here. But overall, I would recommend only buying a little bit of that for yourself at best, and not really try to bank on too much based on what I'm seeing so far. What I do believe has more potential are the new cooking recipes for 205 cooking skill that give you 48 attribute of whichever stat you want. You can see, for example, the required resources for the int food here, and it's quite a lot of different stuff in decent quantities, I would say. These recipes are very easy to find on New World Database because you can just search for banana, because all of them use bananas. So I'm going to show you the recipes quickly, the ingredients that you need, and if you want to buy any of these, then you can just pause here and have a look at what exactly they require. But I'm sure those resources are going to be useful because everyone will want these new stat foods. Now I am going to show you the blessed rivets here real quick because they need 25 powerful gemstone dust, and further the prismatic block also needs a resource, being the runic voidstone, which needs 2 gemstone dust per craft. I'm a bit skeptical about these recipes staying like this because the amount of gemstone dust overall required in the game would be pretty ridiculous. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend investing too much into gemstone dust. I would be a bit cautious with that. It seems to me like something they just kind of put in as filler because they weren't quite sure what to put, but we have no guarantee that it's going to change or not change. Similar things are true for charged sand. If you look at what recipes this is used in, then we have the Spore Jelly bottle, we have the Spore Jelly beaker, and we have the Spore Jelly vial, which are all parts of a new potion that you can craft that gives you extra damage and better loot in the new zone. So this is quite useful, and they also are being used for infused sand, which is then itself used for the higher tier upgrades of this. Currently, the amount of charged sand that you would need in total to get this is absolutely ridiculous. We're talking, I think, more than 1,000 charged sand. And I can't really imagine that staying that way. It seems like a very excessive amount. I could imagine that this may get tuned down. So again, something where you kind of have to choose at your own discretion if you want to fully invest into this and buy a lot of charged sand, or if you want to wait and see if they scale down the recipes a little bit, and this may not be necessary. Regeneration Serum is a very strong new regeneration potion that requires 3 of each of the standard potions at the moment, as well as 5 infused alkahas to craft. Thing is, that thing was way overpowered on the PTR, so we don't know if it's actually going to make it into life. They've disabled it because it basically broke balance. But we also know that they love potions, so maybe they will bring it in just in a nerfed state, and maybe these resources will still be required. Maybe this recipe itself doesn't change. I think having at least a reasonable stash of potions is not a bad idea. I used to recommend investing into timeless shards, but I am not so sure anymore, because again, crafting rate is going down. They may be useful, or they may just be overflowing the market soon. Next up we have patterns, and there are multiple different types here. The first one are rushing patterns, which are extremely cheap with buy orders because basically no one uses them really. And I don't actually know if they will go beyond 600 gear score in the expansion. It's a bit unclear because it seems like they're not even dropping in OP anymore in the expansion. That said, if you're looking to level trade skills, that's a very nice way. You can see the bonus XP down here. You can do that with all the rushing patterns if you just get one of them, and they're very, very cheap. Similarly, we have other event patterns. For example, you can see the Springtide Bloom pattern here. And there's something very nice about the Springtide Bloom patterns in particular, because you can choose your attribute. I think this tip was originally from J Oddity. I hope I'm crediting that to the correct person. Anyways, what you can do with those is you can craft each of them 5 times. Here you can, for example, see that I have crafted the strength versions once, and I've got a little bit of armoring XP from that now, not that much anymore. Whereas here, we have the Dex version, which still gives us the bonus. So yeah, 5 of each patterns for the blooming patterns is a very easy way to get a lot of XP. This once again goes for every single one where you can choose attributes. So you can do that with the summer medley fair stuff from the Kraken stuff as well, and so on and so on. So there's tons and tons of different patterns you can use to get extra XP when crafting, to level crafting. And as you can see, some of these patterns are still fairly cheap, but some are not. So you probably won't get fills for buy orders with those anymore. You just kind of have to get lucky and see what you can find on the market still. Rushing ones are the ones where the buy orders actually fill. If you want to rush level refining or crafting of the expansion, then you have to get a lot of resources, of course. Credit to Urban Monk on my Patreon, who actually made a list calculating all these things. I haven't 100% verified it, but to give you a rough idea of how much you'll need, when it comes to orichalcum, you should roughly need around 6,500 orichalcum ore. For all of the other resources, you probably need around 7,500-ish of the highest tier. So, for example, that would be ironwood, or that would be iron hide, or wire fiber. That said, if you buy too much of any of them, and that's why I didn't do precise calculations, those will likely sell for a very good price after the expansion as well, when other people are trying to level their stuff. Also, you probably want to set these as buy orders in nearly full storages, so the storage overfills when the buy order gets filled. Not the cheapest thing to do anymore, because now a lot of people are doing it, but something worth considering for sure. If you're looking to level crafting in particular, then keep in mind that, for example, Cinnabar or Tolvium can replace orichalcum ingots. All of these purple tier 5 resources can replace the actual tier 5 mat in a recipe, so that can save you a lot of gold depending on how expensive they are. Right now, they're not too bad yet. The same also goes for lower tier resources, so petrified wood, for example, is going for 15 cents right now, which is already on the expensive end. I bought mine for 1 cent. If you want to craft and you don't want to buy a lot of different patterns, or the patterns are too expensive on your market, then I think the second best option is to just go for expedition replicas. You can see, for example, I can still get metallic bone weave for 3 gold on a buy order here. I wouldn't buy it for 20 gold, because at that point it's not really worth it over just crafting in the normal way. But it's usually a fair bit cheaper, and then you can see the same thing here with spectral dust probably going for like 3 gold on the market, and the resource itself going for 20 cents in a buy order. And if Lazarus mats are too expensive, then you can just do the ones for Genesis and so on and so on. And there's a few expeditions where the pricing is usually pretty okay. Alternatively, you can also level with Scarabs. We don't know how much cooldown that will have though. It may have the 3 Scarabs per day cooldown that is introduced for the gathering professions, but it hasn't been specified, so we can only guess here. What I know some people are doing is buying all the very cheap gear for above 500 gear score that can be salvaged and get the chance to get scraps out of that to get their XP that way. I think, at least right here looking at these prices, that's a too high starting point for it to be worth it. I think 15 gold honestly is too expensive for this to be efficient, but you can do the calculations on your own server if you want to consider this option. This is just the buying side of things, so there are also some tips that I have regarding gathering and preparing for the expansion, and that will be a separate video. If you'd like to see that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. I've also discovered a very safe farm, I think, after the expansion that will very likely reliably result in gold, even if many people are doing it. That one I will share on my Patreon, so if you're interested in that, consider supporting me there. That's also where all future early trading tips will be posted. Thanks to everyone on this list who already supports me there. And thank you for watching. Sloth out.